Hey, what is going on everyone? It's me, Mr. Mario, and we're back over here at the PlayStation 4 yet again for another jailbreaking guide here, showing you all if you're running firmware 13 or lower, how you can jailbreak your PlayStation 4. This can be any model, including the original Fat model, the Slim model, and even the Pro model. Now, why am I covering this here yet again, really for the fourth time here? Well, the previous 3 iterations, I showed different options and ways of installing it through View, using View after free. In case you don't know about that, it uses the PlayStation View application, which you can install in multiple different ways and then reuse that application as a jailbreaking tool directly installed on your system. However, it does have some positives and negatives. Some of the positives is that it works pretty reliably, pretty fast, and it is free to do. You really just need a USB drive. But some of the downsides end up being that you have to have some kind of network connection every time you launch it. So for example, even though mine has been set up, let's say I'm not on a connection at all, if I try to jailbreak here, you see you'll end up getting this message right here, and there's no way of getting past that unless you connect to a network again, which many people don't want to keep their consoles connected all the time to a network for various different reasons. Additionally, there's also people, because this depends on the setup on the system and everything, there's actually people who have reported that they've had less success using PlayStation View as opposed to something such as BDJB, and well, this is BDJB here yet again. Thankfully, there was a new jailbreak for BDJB working on firmware 13.00, which was quietly released and updated by PS3 120. So I'm going to be showing you all how you can do that. Really, you need to have a system running anywhere from firmware 9.0 all the way up to firmware 13.00 for this tutorial to work. As long as you're within that range, you'll be fine. And keep in mind, if you're wanting to update to 13, don't do that there. You really kind of just want to stay on your firmware if you can. So for example, if you're on firmware 9.00, you can still follow this guide here. You're just going to be using the Poops ISO instead of Poops 13 once we get to this. But this here is a great option, not only just to have on hand, but additionally, if you don't want to use PlayStation View, or maybe you haven't had the best luck with PlayStation View, you'll be able to burn a disk and then use that as your jailbreaking tool. And at that point, as long as you initialize Blu-ray playback one time, which I'll cover in this video here, you should be good to go, and you can even take your system offline afterwards, so you don't have to worry about updates or any of that stuff if you so choose to do so. But I will still show how you can connect to a network and get online, not for PlayStation Network access because we cannot do that, but just so you could do things like access services, applications, and storefronts so you can download additional homebrew, patches, cheats, and all that fun stuff. Now for a few disclaimers here, like I said earlier, this does work on every single model of the PlayStation 4. That means if you have a PS4 original version, a Slim, or even a Pro, this guide will work for you. What is dependent is the current firmware that you have installed on your system. Like I said, this will work up to firmware 13.00, but your system needs to be on at minimum firmware 9.0, so you can use one of these ISOs, and it cannot be on a firmware higher than 13.00 if you're following this tutorial. Additionally, you would be able to access the internet on the system once we have it set up, and I'll show how to block updates on here as well too through your network, but you will not be able to have PlayStation Network access since that does require being on the latest firmware available. So it's really up to you to choose that there. If you want PlayStation Network, you are going to need to be on the highest firmware. But if you want to be on a lower firmware, you could probably jailbreak your system, but you will not be able to access PSN on that same system. Finally, I get a lot of people asking me here, is there a way I can downgrade my system? And the answer here is maybe, kind of, and I do say this respectfully. Typically, the people who are going to be asking this will not be able to do this maneuver here. You can't do a system downgrade like you can typically do with something like a Vita or a 3DS or even a PS3, but what you can do is a firmware revert on your system. But keep in mind, this is not for the average person. This does involve opening up your system, it does involve some patience, it also involves some really small soldering that you're going to have to do, and it's going to require some manipulation on the system itself in order to get it on a lower firmware. And that might not even be guaranteed. So what I'm saying here is this is certainly not for the faint of heart, and if you're not comfortable opening up your system, soldering, or doing any of these sensitive maneuvers right here, it would be best to keep your current system offline until there is a jailbreak available for your firmware, or if you want something more immediate and you're able to do so financially, pick up another system on a lower firmware and then follow this tutorial to jailbreak it. So now that we've got the disclaimers out of the way for the prerequisites, what exactly are we going to need here? Well, first of all, you do need need your PlayStation 4 in front of you, up and running and operational. As I've said multiple times now, it can be any model of the PlayStation 4. Additionally, you are going to need a working Blu-ray drive for this on your system, since we are going to be using a Blu-ray disc. On top of that, we are going to need a way to burn a Blu-ray disc. So if you want to do this yourself, you're going to need to get a hold of a Blu-ray writer as well as some blank Blu-rays. If you do not want to burn this yourself, there are services, there are people, and there's even websites where you can submit an ISO and have them burn a disc for you. So even if you don't have a burner or you don't want to invest in one, that's understandable, but you're not completely out of luck there. Aside from that, we're also going to need a USB drive in order to download and transfer some files to it. So I'll be using a computer for that, and if you have one on hand, that's just going to make things easier. And the last thing to really keep in mind here is on your PlayStation 4 itself. Like I said earlier, you can keep it offline after you set this up if you so choose to do so, but if you have never run a Blu-ray movie or a TV show or any of that on the system, you are going to need to connect to the internet one time in order to get that Blu-ray working. Once that's been unlocked, you should be good to go offline afterwards, but again, that's up to you. So for our actual hardware, like I said, if you're going to be doing this all yourself, you are going to need a Blu-ray burner or a Blu-ray writer of some kind. It can be an internal one or an external one, but the thing I do caution people is when you're looking these up, be sure you read the listings carefully here, because many of these here that I'm looking at are Blu-ray writers or Blu-ray burners, which is what we want, but some drives, depending on what you get, some drives might name it in a way that could be confusing, and it will read Blu-ray discs, but it will only burn up to DVD. So you do need to keep that in mind. It needs to be a Blu-ray burner. And yes, it must be a Blu-ray. It cannot be a CD, it cannot be a DVD, it cannot be a game, a TV show, a movie, any of that stuff. It needs to be on a Blu-ray disc, and we need a blank Blu-ray disc to work with. So once you get your burner sorted, let's look at the discs. Now there's two types of Blu-ray discs you can get. You can get a BDR such as this, which means you can only burn to it one time and then it's done, or you can get a BDRE disc, meaning that you can always rewrite to it if you want to. Now many people have recommended getting BDRE discs because that way you can always update the image on there. For example, I started burning these Blu-ray discs on 12.02, and I've been able to reburn them several times using the same disc, because whenever the jailbreaks get updated with BDJB, I'm just able to rewrite that same disc, as opposed to using a new one every single time. Just keep in mind the rewritable discs are going to cost more than these single write discs, but aside from that, either one of them should work just fine for you. Now I've used cheap Blu-ray discs, I've used expensive ones as well too, but the RE discs that I've had luck with and have worked flawlessly for me have been these ones right here, the Verbatim 43694. You can get a 10-pack right here. This is the same one I got, and it worked pretty well. Now, as long as you have your burner and your discs, those are the hard things there. Now, as for hardware, I'm not even really going to show this here, but for the last thing we need, we really just need a USB drive of some kind. We're going to copy some files to and from it for the PS4, so that's going to be needed for this. And aside from that, that's all the hardware that's covered here. And now for the downloads, there's going to be several things to get here. The first one is going to be the BDJB 1250 ISO from PS3 120. Now I know that might be a little bit confusing here, especially because I said 1250, it says 12.52, and the guide is for 13, well up to 13, but I can explain on here. PS3 120 ended up forking this from an earlier build of BDJB released by Gajina, but then they've also updated this for 13.00. So you can certainly read the instructions here, although they might not be 100% applicable to you. But once you get an understanding of this here, you can scroll over to the releases section, and there's going to be several ISOs available. Now keep this in mind here, the kernel exploit we're going to be using here if you're on firmware 13 is going to be Poopsploit, which is also working on this early one from firmware 9 up to 12.52, which, you know, I'm not sure how much longer I can keep doing this here, so I gotta drop this reference again.
Look, we're adults in here, you can say it.
Poop?
You said poop! I said! I said poop in here!
Poop!
Either way, if you're going to be sticking to Poopsploit here, there's going to be one of two ISO files you're going to need to use. The first one, if you have any firmware from 9.00 all the way up to 12.52, you're going to use poops.iso. And finally, if you have firmware 13.00, you specifically need poops13.iso. Unfortunately, there's no unified ISO, so this is me directly saying that the 13 ISO only works for firmware 13. So depending on the firmware that your system is running, download the applicable ISO. Next up, if you haven't set this up before, you're going to need a payload of some kind to run HEN, and the one that most people use and recommend is going to be GoldHEN. If there's another type of HEN you want to use, feel free to use that and just sub it in here, but the one that I'm going to be showing will be GoldHEN. If you want to download it, again, the link will be down below in the description, like all the other downloads. You can go over to Sistro's Coffee page and navigate over to Shop, and then look for the latest version available. At the time of recording, the latest build is version 2.4, beta 18.9. Go ahead, click on this, do the verification if you need to, and then from here you can give a donation, or if you just want it for free, you can put in 0 and continue on. Now, do keep in mind here, the thing that I do say in these videos is that if you do value the work here, if you appreciate it, if you like what Sistro has done, a donation is always welcomed and appreciated. I'm not affiliated with Sistro. This is just me being honest right here, but like I said, it is optional, and if you just want to get the download, you can put in 0, click get now, and go through the download process. It will download in a 7-zip archive, so if you're having trouble opening up or extracting that, I would recommend downloading and installing 7-zip. I'll also show how to install package files here, and one of the first ones, if not the first one you can download, is going to be the PS4 store or the Homebrew store. In order to download this, you can go over to the releases section, and the one we're going to be downloading is Store R2 package. You want to get that one specifically. We don't want the legacy one, we don't want the PS5 one, just download Store R2.package and save it somewhere you can easily find it. And lastly, to actually burn that ISO file we downloaded, I'm going to recommend Image Burn. Now, this is a Windows program, so if you're using Linux or Mac OS, you are free to use your own software. You really just need something that can burn an ISO file to a Blu-ray disc, which is not hard to find. However, if you're using Windows, the one I recommend is Image Burn. You can just download this and install it like any standard application, and that's it for the downloads. All right, now for our files right here, you need Image Burn already downloaded and installed. You should also have the Poops ISO that you've chosen, GoldHEN, the store, as well as any other packages you want to install. I'm going to show these ones as a demonstration, but this is Untitled Goose Game, the base version, as well as an update file. If you are interested in learning how to back up your own games and such, I do have a full guide showing how to do that, but this will just be used as a demonstration in a few minutes. Either way, once you have everything set up here, go ahead, hook up your Blu-ray burner if you have not done so already, and then open up Image Burn. It will look like this. You just need to click on Write Image File to Disk, and then once that's there, you can either drag or drop your ISO, or you can click the folder right here and browse for it individually. I do need to pop in a disk, so let me go ahead and do that. Now, to actually burn a Blu-ray disc, you're going to want to take your blank disc, pop it into your disk drive, and you should see some information pop up here. For example, also showing that it is empty. Now, in order to burn this here, you just need your ISO selected, the disk and the drive, and then right here for the write speed, I'd recommend looking at supported write speeds and just select the slowest one. Since this one is 2x, I've already selected 2x. But keep in mind the image here is so small that it's only going to take a few seconds to burn over. Now, this one is a BDR disk that I've put in here, meaning that it's only going to be a single use burn. So in order to burn a BDR, pretty simple, you set up everything, click on this button here, and wait. Now, despite this being the slowest speed here, this took a whopping 44 seconds, so you can see it is incredibly fast burning this since this is a small image. And at that point, you can eject your disk and you're done at that point. That is half the battle right there. Congratulations, that was the hardest part of this jailbreak, I would say. Now, if you're using a BDRE disk, it's going to be about the same, but this will take you about an hour instead of a minute, because you see, if you've never burned onto this BDRE disk, it's going to tell you the disk needs formatting. So it's going to be the same thing as before. Put in your ISO, pick the slowest write speed, and then click on burn. But keep in mind, it's going to say the disk needs to be formatted before you can write to it. Would you like to format it now? You're going to say yes. So again, the first time you use a BDRE disk, it will take probably about an hour. And finally, if you're using a BDRE disk that you're updating, meaning that you've burned to it before, it's going to look like this, and it will tell you the disk is not empty. Just go ahead and pop it in, same thing as before, select your ISO, select burn. It's going to tell you the disk is not empty, all the data on the disk will be overwritten. Do you want to continue? Say yes. And same as before, it's going to erase the disk and then it's going to burn the new image to it. Now, this one actually took less time here, but you could see in 27 seconds, that's all it needed right there. So there we go, that's 3 different ways of burning the ISO, so you should have that covered now. Now for our next steps, we need to prepare our USB drive. Go ahead, connect your USB drive if you haven't already, and this needs to be formatted to, it could be either FAT32 or exFAT, but if you're working with the PS4, I'd recommend using exFAT, so that way you can easily copy files onto there that are larger than 4 GB. gigabytes. In order to do that here, if you have to format it, first of all, make sure you back up any data you care about from the drive. Since this one is empty, it doesn't matter to me, but I'm going to right click, go to format, select exFAT, allocation size can be default, any label is fine, quick format is fine, click on start, okay, and that's it. So there we go, our USB drive has now been prepped. We can now minimize this and go over to your GoldHEN archive. Use something like 7-zip that will allow you to right click, go to 7-zip, and extract it into its own folder. Once you have the GoldHEN folder, open it up, and there's going to be one file we care about in here, which is goldhen.bin. Go ahead, right click, and copy this out. Now go to your USB drive, and we're going to put it in the root of the USB drive. You can paste it right there, and that's all we need, but we need to rename it as well. If you're using Windows, click on View, Show, and enable file name extensions. You are going to have to rename this from goldhen.bin to payload.bin. It needs to look exactly like that, and as long as it's renamed successfully, you should be in good shape. The next thing is going to be our packages, which will be even easier. In order to install any package, such as Store R2, you just need to bring it over to the USB drive. It will be in the root of the drive, and that's all there is. Now, if there's any other packages you want to install, feel free to copy them over to here. Like I said, I am going to be using this as an example, so I have Untitled Goose Game, the game itself, as well as the update file. I'm just going to drag and drop these over, give it a few moments to copy over, but you can see that's really all there is to it. So there we go, once that's all copied over, that is literally all we have to do for the USB drive. So you can see the Blu-ray was really the hardest part of this video. So once we're done, we just need to right click, eject our USB drive, and now we can take that USB drive over to our console along with our freshly burned disk. Back over at the PS4, before we jump into the land of jailbreaking, there's just a little bit of prep work we have to do here. Navigate up to Settings, go all the way down to System, and the first thing we need to disable is all of the downloads. Go ahead, disable all these here because we do not want automatic downloads or updates or anything to mess with our jailbreak, because this is the easiest way of losing your jailbreak. I'll say this, I've kept these disabled for several years at this point now, and I have accidentally updated my PS4 exactly 0 times. So as long as you manage it properly, you should not lose your jailbreak. Once we get out of there, the second option we need to enable is HDCP. Since we're using the Blu-ray drive and a Blu-ray disc, we do need HDCP enabled. The next thing is going to be our notifications. Scroll up, we need to look for notifications, and go over to this setting here, disable pop-ups while playing video, and make sure it is disabled. We do want those pop-ups to show up. The last thing is going to be our actual network. If you have not set up a network at this point, I would recommend you do so for the first time you run this, in case you've never run a Blu-ray movie on your console or you're not sure if you have in the past. In order to do that, go into Network, go over to Set up Internet Connection, and then you can choose how you're going to connect. I'm personally going to be using LAN, so for this time here, I'm just going to do an easy connection. Now be warned, it might try to download a system update, so you just need to be quick about pausing it and deleting it. But let's go ahead, check easy. Yep, there we go, it's telling us to update the system software, and even if you test your connection, it should fail on PSN, but everything else should work. We're gonna have download and upload, we're okay at that point. So there we go. I can also check my notifications here, let me see. Yep, there's no download, so we're okay on that. But now that we have all that set up here, we're now ready to actually jailbreak our system. So take your USB drive if you haven't already done so, plug it into your system, and take that Blu-ray disc and insert it. The disc should start spinning up here, and after a few seconds, we should have, there we go, BDJB poops show up. So once it shows up here, you just need to launch this. Again, make sure your USB drive is inserted. Now, as a heads up, when you run this here, you might get 2 of these prompts. The first message here you might get if you choose not to be online and you've never watched a Blu-ray movie on this system. In order to launch this disc, you must be connected to the internet one time while it is launching. So go in, make sure you're connected to the internet, and then launch the disc. The second one might be this BD Live message here, and you can just go ahead and say yes and continue on. Outside of that, I've already done that on the system here, so for me, I'm just going to launch it and wait. Now there we go, if it's successful, it should get to this point, it will tell you the payload's been found, the payload has been copied to your internal drive, and there we go, we now have GoldHEN. So at this point, you could also see at the bottom, mine does say poops execution completed. And if yours does not say this here, or if you don't get to this point, just go ahead, physically turn off the system and turn it back on. You're going to bring up the quick menu, go over here and either restart the system or turn it off, turn it back on, and try again. Due to the nature of these jailbreaks, they might not always work the first time around, but you can see here, this one worked for me. So once this is all done, you can just press the PlayStation button to exit back out. And once you're here, you can go ahead, highlight this, and we're going to close the application from the options menu. And that should be about it for this. So now that that's closed, check this out. You can tell your PS4 is jailbroken because if you come up here, we now have the GoldHEN Settings page as opposed to the actual PlayStation Network page. But before we do that here, first of all, congratulate yourself because you have been able to jailbreak your system. But secondly, I would recommend putting in a network setting here. So if you want to take your system offline, you can do so now. But if you want to keep your system online, but still keep it safe from updates and such, this is what you can do. Scroll up here, go over to your settings, go down to network, go over to setup internet connection, use whichever option you're going to choose here. And instead of easy, we're going to do custom. Now in here, for your IP address settings, you can set them as automatic unless you want to go manual. DHCP hostname do not specify. For the DNS settings here, we're going to change this to manual, and this is going to be the recommended DNS server to connect to. It will be this right here, which is 62.210.38.117. This has been designed to explicitly block Sony's servers and traffic on there, so that way you won't get access to system updates, but also game updates and patches as well too. However, some people have run into issues setting this here and still getting updates on their system. And if that is the case, that is typically your router or even your ISP, which is taking over the DNS. So if this doesn't work, an alternative one you can try is also 127.0.0.2. That will block internet access entirely, but it will allow you to have local network access. And if you're still having issues with that, you might just have to go into your router settings and either block your PS4 from getting online or block Sony traffic. It's going to be up to you on there, and that's not going to be covered in this video, but at least on my setup here, this DNS has worked. You just need to set the primary, you don't need to set the secondary. Go to next, MTU's automatic, do not use proxy, and we can test our internet connection. Now, it's probably going to fail out here in some spots, but as long as we get an IP address, we should be good. We see that one successful, and yep, internet connection failed, but don't worry, as long as we have an IP, we should be in a good spot. From here, we can go ahead, exit out of here, and we can now start messing with the actual jailbreak itself. The first thing I'd recommend doing is scrolling up here, going all the way to the left, and entering the GoldHEN menu. This is going to bring you to your GoldHEN settings, which this is going to be where some of the fun stuff is. First of all, in your debug settings, the package installer we can just keep as default, but for the debug settings here, we are going to want to enable this. You can use either the mini or the full menu. I typically use the full menu, and you can even enable debug game settings if you want to. I personally choose to do that, and if you want to copy this, feel free to. Next up in your cheat settings, I'd recommend enabling the cheat menu here. Show title ID, this will allow you to see some more granular options on the XMB. So for example, I like to do title ID and app version, and you'll see you'll have the title IDs and app versions of all of your applications now. Just keep in mind though, if you do have a ton of applications and games installed, this could slow down performance in your menus. So you might have to disable that later on, or just go with another option such as, well, like only title ID or only app version. That's going to be up to you. Now, this is where it does help to be connected to the internet because I would recommend updating the cheat archive. We can go ahead, select this option here. It's going to say updating cheats, and let's just give it a few moments. There we go, it told us the cheats were updated, just had to download and set them up there. So now we can exit out of here, go down to the plugin settings, and I'd recommend enabling the plugins loader, as well as updating the patch archive. It's going to do the same thing where it's going to download any patches and apply them. So let it update, and there we go, patches have been updated. And the last thing we're going to do is update the plugin archive. Same thing as before, go ahead, run that option, and let it download all the plugins needed. There we go, plugins have been updated. Now this also unlocks a few options right here. One of them is the Enable AIO Fix plugin, which I do not recommend running here, but we do want to enable the Game Patch plugin. That's going to be necessary if you want to run any patches on your games. So now that that's done, also for game overlay settings, if you want to, you can enable an FPS counter. You can also show different pieces of information on there and even run scan lines. I'm not going to do that, I just like having the FPS counter there. Now for the server settings here, I do like having the FTP server enabled. I also like having the payload server if you want to send over additional payloads. And unless you really need it, you probably won't need the kernel log server right here. So I'm going to keep that one disabled. As for our actual settings in here, you do want to have rest mode enabled. I'd also recommend here enabling BD auto kill, so that way whenever you run your Blu-ray disc, it'll just automatically close out of the application. Lastly, we can also go over to date and time. I'm going to choose to update the date and time, and I'll even enable auto update of date and time, just so it does that every time we launch GoldHEN. Now for the About section here, this is more of the fun stuff here. You can check out the different features that GoldHEN has within its About section. You can also check out the cheat menu as well too, the plugins credits on here, and you can even learn a little more about Sistro from their About Me section. Although I have said this a few times here, usually it's not going to be the best to browse it on here. I mean, it looks nice, you can see this, but probably better on a mobile screen or a desktop, of course. Additionally, you could also see the GoldHEN supporters, so if you donate to GoldHEN, you do get added here in the next build. You can support GoldHEN as well too, which I do recommend, but not on the PS4 itself here. You're just going to see that accessing Ko-Fi is not really the best experience, so probably just do that on another device. And the last thing here, which I'm not going to fully spoil, is going to be, well, the old school Cracktro. You can check this out and see right here, it all loads up in your browser, and it looks a little cool, but I'll let you see the whole thing there for yourself on your own system. Either way, that's about it for the GoldHEN settings here. Now we can get to having some more fun with installing package files. In order to do that, you just need that same USB drive plugged in, make sure your packages are on hand, and now we can scroll all the way over to settings, go all the way down, and we're going to find debug settings now. And within debug settings, go to game, go to the package installer, and you should see a list of packages available here. Now, if there's any other ones you got, they're going to show up, but the one you should have at minimum is Store R2. I'm going to go ahead and install all of these here. So here we go, we got the store installed, and here's our game. And lastly here, we have the update package for this. So there we go, those have all been installed successfully. We can exit back out and check it out. You probably have your first Homebrew app right here, which is the Homebrew store, and you also now know how to install any games. It's pretty easy like that. If you do want to know how to back up and create your backups and install them on the PS4, as I mentioned before, there is a video I released recently showing the entire process of doing that. That's not going to be covered in this video, but if you want to see the nitty-gritty, I'll probably have it linked down below in the description. But now if you want to use the actual Homebrew store itself, this one does require internet, so once you are connected to the internet, go ahead and fire up the Homebrew store. When you fire it up, it's going to say an update is required. Just go ahead, hit OK, and let it update. Once the update's been applied, hit OK yet again. And it gives you a couple of donation methods here if you do want to support the Homebrew store, so you can continue on with that. It's going to preload the icons there. And once it is connected, congratulations, you now have the Homebrew store up and running. Now from here, there's several different applications that you can choose to set up and install on here, and some of the first ones I recommend are, one of them is the Items Flow Game Manager. Not only it's a nice, well, game manager and alternative launcher on here, but if you do want to back up your own games and such, you are going to need to use Items Flow on here. You can use a payload for it, but technically Items Flow is going to be the more recommended and more modern option. I'd also recommend here using PS4 Explorer 2.0. Make sure you get the 2.0 version, not the original version. We can also get Apollo Save Tool. Let me go ahead and grab that. So Apollo Save Tool is also a phenomenal one if you have not used it before. And even though we technically have this built into GoldHEN itself, I still like to grab the PS4 Cheats Manager just to, well, manage our cheats pretty easily for us. Now there we go, we have all of those installed, so you can check out the rest of the store yourself, but that's just a basic setup of how to use it. Now we can go ahead and close out of the store, And you can check this out. Right here, we have all of our other applications that we've just installed. So congratulations, if you're still following along here, you should hopefully have some nice new Homebrew on your system. Now real quick, because this has been a little bit streamlined, I can actually show you how to use patches and cheats in one go. Now keep in mind, not every single game is going to have patches or cheats or even both applicable to it, and even then it entirely depends on the actual build of the game itself, really the update and which one you're using here. For this example, I'm going to be using Bloodborne just because it's a real quick way of doing this. If you want to check your game for patches or even enable patches, highlight the game before it has booted up and press down on the options button, and there's going to be a new option up at the top, which is the GoldHEN patch menu. Navigate in there, and there's going to be several options available here if you have a patch for this specific build of the game. In order to do that here, to enable a patch, I'm going to skip intro, disable chromatic aberration, motion blur. We're going to do 60 frames per second, the resolution patch just to bring it down to 720p, disable VSync. I think those are some good ones there. So once you have your patches set up, go ahead and fire up your game and they should apply. Now give it a few moments here, it's going to give us a notification letting us know of it, and you can see 6 patches applied, 161 patch lines applied. So we're all good there. That's okay. Now let's go ahead, play offline, and you can see in the bottom right, we do have the 60 frame per second patch from Lance McDonald already loaded in. I'll go ahead and do a new game here. Now you can see here, we're at the beginning of the game, and if you look in the bottom left-hand corner, I did have to enable the actual counter itself to show up, so I missed that earlier in the GoldHEN settings, but you could see right there that the game is running at, well, it's certainly not 30 frames per second. It's not like it's like stable, but this is also because I'm running it on an original PS4, not a PS4 Pro or even a PS5. So you could also see if you've played this game before, it just looks a little bit nicer, at least in my opinion it looks cleaner here. Now it's showing pretty obviously here that the patch is working in place, but another fun thing that we can do here is also cheat support. Now in order to enable cheats, what you can do is while you're in game, hold down the share button on your controller, and it's going to bring up the GoldHEN cheat menu. Now it depends on which version of the game you have, which update, and even which cheats might be available. You can see here I can actually cycle through different cheat sheets, I suppose you can say, using the L1 and R1 buttons. So there are different people who end up making it different cheats for this, and you might have to play around with them. But for example, on this first one, let me enable the master code, and I'll just do infinite everything here. Yeah, that should be pretty obvious. Once you have all your cheats dialed in, you can go ahead and press the back button, and you can see here, well, it's changed pretty immediately. You can see I have all 9s in the top right, and let's see, even if I kind of break the game and attack this guy here. There, yeah, that was... see, that was just one hit right there. So you can see that's how you can apply patches and cheats to your game when applicable. Let's go ahead and exit out of here though, so you can have some more fun on your own there. Now for our next few line items here, these are going to be things that you should know now running a jailbroken PS4, and these are a lot of common questions that I ask, so I'm going to give some answers here. Now let's say you've just set up your PS4 how you like it, you're really excited, you got some games installed, you got your cheats, and you decide to retire your PS4. You go, you turn it off, and you're going to mess around with it the next day. Now let's say it's the next day, you've been thinking about your PS4, you just want to sit down and play some games and have fun with the patches and cheats that I just showed on here, but there's going to be a little bit of an unfortunate situation. When you turn it on here, you're going to see, look, Bloodborne is no longer working. Homebrew Store, which we were just using, is no longer working. Even Untitled Goose Game, none of these games are working. How can you fix this up? Well, this is due to the nature of the jailbreak itself. You see, this jailbreak is a tethered jailbreak, meaning every single time you do a full power cycle of the PS4, meaning you've turned it off, or you've restarted it, or you ended up losing power, or something else happened, the PS4 just completely lost power. That means you've lost your jailbreak and you need to enable it again. Now, you don't have to do the entire setup all over. You actually don't even need the USB drive at this point, so if you still have your USB drive, go ahead and disconnect it. Since you have the payload already installed, just make sure you have your BDJB disk inserted and fire it up. Just the same as before, it's going to go through everything here. Now this here is actually a good example of it failing. The system is not frozen, but you can see that if it's not really moving, it's been here for about a minute, then generally that means it's failed out. And if it failed out, like I said earlier, just go over to power and restart your PS4. So since that was a good example of a failure, let's go ahead and try this again. And there we go. You could see that one was very quick, but it loaded up a lot faster and it looked a lot better here. So let's go ahead and wait for it to close out. We're good. We did miss out on some of the notifications, but you could see FTP is running, the payload sender is listening, and there should be 1 or 2 more notifications. I think that's the last one there. But either way, once you have that running, check this out. We do have our title IDs and our version numbers available. And if we want to run anything here, like, you know what, let's do something different. This time around, we're going to run Untitled Goose Game. Look at that. We no longer get that error message. We're able to boot it up just fine. And we also have the frame per second counter in the bottom left. So that means that this is all loaded up and working successfully. Boom. So we're in a better spot now. Now, let's say you don't want to do that every single time, which is understandable. Every time you use your PS4, you don't want to use the Blu-ray disc. Some people don't really want to do that. Well, that's why there's also rest mode support on here. Now, rest mode has gotten better over the years, but keep in mind it can still be spotty on some systems depending on the model and such. But in order to run rest mode, you can do this to avoid having to launch your jailbreak every time you boot it up. Just go ahead, hold down your PlayStation button, go to power, go to enter rest mode, and wait a few seconds. So now that my PS4 is lit up orange, we're going to go ahead and turn it back on. Here we go, it's coming back online, and let's just see what we got here. So you can see it was not the full boot up sequence, but once we do this, boom, yep, we got our BDJB disc, we have everything showing here, and we're going to get a few notifications. So you can see, even though we did all of that, we still did not have to fully power down our PS4, but we have the jailbreak in memory, which is exactly what we wanted. So this time around, I can actually fire up Bloodborne, and we're going to do the same thing. I won't do the whole rigmarole like I just showed earlier, but I'm at least showing that it works. And yep, we got the patches, we got the frame per second counter. We're in a pretty good spot here. So we can go ahead, hit play offline, and yeah, I'd say we're good here. Let's go ahead and close out of that. Now, another thing people ask is, what about preventing firmware updates? And like I said, one of the most important settings is going to be within your settings, within system, and making sure all of your automatic downloads are disabled. Additionally, if you are going to put your system on a network like we did earlier, it is going to be recommended to use that DNS that I had in place. So again, you'd use this. We're going to do custom, automatic, do not specify, manual, and it's going to be this one right here, 62.210.38.117. And as long as you have that in place and it respects that DNS, this is going to block any of that traffic, so you won't be able to get game updates, patch updates, or any of that, or system updates for your system itself. So those are generally the rules of thumb you want to keep in place in order to keep your system a little bit safe. Lastly, many people have also asked, can the Blu-ray disc be removed? And the answer is yes. I personally like to have my disc in the drive, so that way when I turn on the system, I can just run the disc and go. But do keep in mind that it's not like it's going to really damage your system by doing so. Some people do believe that, and will there be a little bit of wear and tear on your disk drive? Yes, but if you're just going to be running this here for a few seconds and just going to spin like that, it's really going to be pretty negligible in damage. I'd actually argue that putting in an actual game disc and installing that, or even watching a movie, would be far more damaging than using the BDJB disc and just keeping it in there. So it's going to be up to you. But yes, if you want to remove this, you are more than welcome to remove your disc. There's nothing stopping you. Either way, that is about it for this video here. Hopefully this helped out. Hopefully you all were able to get up and running. This is more set up for folks who might have never jailbroken their system, or they were kind of thinking about it. Maybe they didn't want to use PlayStation View and they now have this entry point with BDJB. So you can now have fun if you're on firmware 13, or really up to firmware 13 at this point, using BDJB. The nice thing is we don't need to unpatch it, and aside from making sure you have that internet connectivity the first time you run a Blu-ray disc, once you're done, you no longer have a network reliance. So if you want to disconnect your system completely, you don't want any updates, you don't want any network touching it, you can do that. And there's plenty of people who have wanted that for their systems. So now you have it. Either way, that's about it for this video here. This is Mr. Mario, signing off. Thank you all for watching, everyone. If you enjoyed this video, a like would absolutely be appreciated. And if you didn't like it, a dislike is fine as well too.